Hello YouTube, this is Mike. A little sleepy today. So I don't know, we'll see where this goes. I just wanted to share with you my experience of what is, I think, probably the most destructive and the most debilitating aspect of being in a romantic relationship with an untreated toxic borderline. So if you're new to this channel is designed for people who do not suffer from any kind of personality disorder, who have been or are currently in a romantic relationship with an untreated, undiagnosed, and or toxic borderline, somebody who suffers from borderline personality disorder. If you are in a relationship with borderline and you guys get along and you have a great relationship, these videos are not for you. Stop sending me nasty messages telling me that I'm stigmatizing people. I'm not. If you are a borderline and you are in therapy and you are having great relationships and you're able to manage your symptoms, these videos are not about you. Stop sending me messages telling me that I'm stigmatizing you. I'm not. These videos are for one specific type of person, and that person is somebody who is suffering, who is in a great deal of pain, who has found themselves stuck in a revolving hamster wheel of pain and loneliness and emptiness and shame and destruction. And you're having a hard time finding your sense of self. You're having a hard time getting on with your life. You're trapped and you're in a great deal of pain. And you happen to be dating somebody who suffers from borderline personality disorder, or you think they might be suffering from that. That's what these videos are about. So I am not a therapist. I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am not a trained mental health professional. I do not have, to the best of my knowledge, I do not have any personality disorder. And so I can't talk about from that. I am somebody who survived and completely healed, 100% healed from this toxic relationship dynamic of being in a romantic relationship with a borderline. So if that's what you want, that's what I'm here to offer. All right, so let's get on with the video. So we've talked over the past year and a couple of months, we've talked a lot about a year and a couple of months. It's been over a year and a half. We've talked a lot about borderlines. I've shared with you a lot of my discoveries about what borderline personality disorder is, how they think, the dynamics of the relationship, the kinds of people that are attracted to and become enmeshed with borderlines. But today what I want to share with you is my most recent personal discovery about what is the most toxic and painful dynamic of the relationship, and what it is that actually keeps you trapped. You think about it. I'm somebody, I've had, I'm going to be 58 here pretty soon. I've had a lot of relationships in my life. I'm not competing with anybody, but I've had more than a few girlfriends. I've been married once, was engaged once. So I've had a lot of romantic relationships. And in those romantic relationships, I was able to leave when things got destructive. I was able to, I in fact, was the person that instigated the divorce in my marriage, But, I've been broken up with, of course. I've had my share of being broken up with. Plenty of mutual breakups where we both get together and we both realize that things aren't going the way that we want, or somebody wants to move to another part of the country, or who knows, whatever the heck it is. And so you mutually decide to part. But the inability to leave the most painful, destructive relationship in my entire life was very confusing to me. And so I've narrowed down what it is, I think. Not only what it is that keeps you trapped in this dynamic, this hamster wheel you can't get off of, but also what is most damaging, most toxic about it. And that would be what people euphemistically call cognitive dissonance. I love these phrases because it normalizes craziness. It normalizes that which is, totally irrational. And this is one of those phrases, cognitive dissonance. It's just a fancy way of saying toxic confusion. Because what is most painful, in case there's any borderlines watching, by the way, borderline personality disorder can be treated. Those, I have the 4 things for people with, for people who have the codependent dynamic. But I will now give you 3 things. If you are a borderline, here are the 3 things that you must do if you want to have healthy relationships. Number 1 is, of course, DBT therapy. Number 2 is do your workbook, do those daily exercises that, at least I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think there's at least one DBT workbook out there where you do your exercises and your assignments every day, and go to group therapy. Do those 3 things, and based on my research, you can eventually heal enough to be able to have romantic relationships. But for those codependents out there thinking, I know, I'll just go to my borderline and say, here are the 3 things. Doesn't work like that. The borderline has to want to do it for themselves. Any of you in relationships with borderlines, if you think that you can get them into therapy, and as long as you get them into therapy, it'll all be okay, no. If they go into therapy because you told them to, they will resent you for it, and it won't take. They have to do it because they want to do it. That's why, going no contact is one of the best things you can do, because then they have nobody to fall back on, and they will be more likely to go and get help for themselves. Anyway, so I forgot what I was talking about. Yes, I'm very tired today. So this confusion, this toxic confusion, if you get past all of the, there's levels of defense mechanisms if you are in a relationship with a borderline. And bear in mind, if you are in a relationship with an untreated or toxic borderline, you are in a state of PTSD. You are in a survival state. The majority of your brain is shut off, and you are completely operating from your reptilian brainstem. You are in fight or flight or tend and befriend. Have you ever heard those 2? So you've heard of fight or flight. So that's obvious. I mean, there's a danger to your life, and so you have 2 options. You either fight and kill what's trying to kill you, or you run for your life and you survive. But there's another aspect, which is another response dynamic, which is part of that same thing, which is called tend and befriend. And the way it's explained is that way back in caveman times, which evolutionarily speaking, we are still cavemen. Even though in the past, really just a couple hundred years, we've got all this technology. We don't need to go out and chase down, plant, and kill or forage for our survival on a daily basis. Even though we're not doing that now, our bodies haven't evolved beyond that. And so this fight or flight or tend or befriend is such a deep, important part of our survival. And so this is where you're at. If you're in a relationship with a borderline, your full brain is not functioning. You are simply in a state of survival. You are in a state of trauma. And so fight or flight is obvious, but tend or befriend, the way it's explained is that way back in caveman times, what would happen is the males would stand up and they'd beat their chests and they'd, throw sticks around and whatever and yell and scream and then fight, or they would run away. They'd grab the kids and they'd run away from the attacking, invading, neighboring cavemen. But before all that tension builds to some kind of, war, what'll happen, according to the theory, is that the females will go and bring gifts. They will go and try and create a connection. They will try and reduce the tension. They will make friends. Or while the males are out there fighting and killing each other, they will stay in the cave and they will tend to the old and to the infants. So there's fight or flight or tend and befriend. Tend and befriend is coming from the same place in your brain as fight or flight. There's no difference in terms of your, was it your limbic system? There's no difference in your nervous system between smashing somebody's head in with a rock and going and placating somebody and making them like you. There's no difference. So those of you empaths out there, those of you super empaths who take such pride in the fact that you just have all this love to give, you are operating from the same part of the brain that the same guy that goes out to destroy and kill. You're using the same part of your brain. There's nothing more evolved about what you're doing. Tend and befriend. Do you like me? Is it okay? Here, take this. What do you want me to do for you? Just don't hurt me. Do you like me? Will you love me? If I do this, will you love me now? I'm such an empath. I just give and I give and I give. No, you're this far away from turning into a murderous killer. All of those feelings of empathy that keep you trapped in this destructive relationship. The reason why you're trapped in a destructive relationship, even though you are the giver and the lover, is that you are in that same state of trauma. Same state of trauma as the person as the borderline. When the borderline is splitting on you, obviously they are in fight or flight mode, or fight and flight. First they'll fight with you and then they'll run. You can't be more frightened than that. They're so frightened. I mean, they are in such a state of trauma and shock and terror, simply because you dared to love them. So you are responding in kind. Your need to constantly placate, to walk on eggshells, to no matter what happens, you're going to prove to them that they're safe. That is tend and befriend. That is a state of trauma. And when you are in that state of trauma, you are not using your full brain. You are not thinking clearly. You are not thinking rationally. And you're stuck. So, the amount of time that you spend in a relationship with a borderline, whether you're in contact with them or not, once you get on that hamster wheel, you don't get off, simply because there's no longer contact, because they've split on you and they've left. And you're still waiting for them to call, or you're checking them on Facebook. Just because you're not talking to them today doesn't mean that you aren't still in the relationship. You're still in that tender befriend. You're still in pure survival mode. But what I've come to realize is that the most damaging part is the confusion. Where does the confusion come from? The confusion comes from the irrational behavior of the splitting. So for borderlines watching me, listen, every now and then, I got one the other day. If you're following my comments, you might see it. A borderline came on and left 3 huge comments on one of my videos telling me how they're not crazy and we're just more spiritual and more sensitive, and we really do know, I'm not in therapy, but and of course completely clueless to the whole point of this channel, which is I'm not interested in coming here and talking smack about anybody. Not interested in coming here and pointing fingers and calling borderlines crazy or anything like that. I have no need to do that. I don't think like that. What I'm trying to point out is the horrific damage that is done to the partners of borderlines, specifically in romantic relationships. My experience is that there isn't really any safe place for partners of borderlines to go. And there's very little awareness, even in the psychological community. There's, a psychologist may have a textbook understanding of borderline personality disorder, and they may have an awareness that borderlines have difficulty, to say the least. They have difficulty managing their emotions in romantic relationships, and those can be traumatic and challenging and difficult. If you hear that without having experienced it, you're like, oh yeah, I dated chicks like that before, man. Yeah, she was really, high strung and emotional, but you just got to know how to, but until you've experienced it, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I don't care how many books you've read. I don't care how many letters there are after your name. You have no clue what the hell you're talking about. And as I've shared before, I even played it on one of my videos. I played, I didn't play the video, but I played the audio of a YouTube video where there were 2 psychologists, experts in their field, and they were both talking to each other. Of course, neither of them are borderlines. And they were talking to each other about the stigmatization of borderlines and how they're stigmatized. And one of them starts to imagine what it would be like if he was in a relationship with a borderline. And he says, I would like to think that if I was with my borderline partner and they were triggered, again, another euphemism, and they were triggered, I'd like to believe that I would be able to go, oh, that's just them being triggered right now, and I'm not going to respond. And as long as I stay, grounded and I don't react, they'll be able to realize that they're safe. And, the other one said the same thing. Yeah, it's just, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that to somebody who had Parkinson's or whatever it is, or had dementia. You would treat them with love and respect. And I'm like, you've never been in this relationship. I know you've never been in a romantic relationship with them. If you honestly think that when a borderline is triggered, that there's really something you can do to prevent them from completely slaughtering your psychological sense of self, then you've never experienced it. You've never been there. You have no idea what that's like. And that's what's missing, with the borderlines that want to argue with me about BPD is not a disease and we're not bad people. It's like, I never said anything about you being bad people. Find one time where I've said that. What I'm saying is that they're not aware. Even when they say that they're aware. Lots of times you'll hear a borderline say, and I know that I hurt people, but, and then they'll go on to explain why it's okay, or why, they'll go on to try to justify it in some way. But obviously you don't know. You don't know, because you wouldn't then follow with the, I know I hurt people, but. You wouldn't follow that with a but. It's like saying, I know I stab people in the eye with an ice pick. I know I do that, but. No, there's no but. Once you get stabbed in the eye with an ice pick, I mean, that's it. There's no more the eye isn't coming back. It's over. There's no. That's the end of the discussion right there. You stab somebody in the eye with an ice pick. That's it. There's no coming back from that. So, what? Again, I'm just talking in circles here. But what I've come to the realization, looking at my family of origin and the, still the issues that I still am working through, is that underneath first the pain, the sadness and the pain of being rejected or feeling rejected, and then the response to that, which is the anger. Once you're not gonna, here's what happens. When you're in a relationship with a borderline, of course, what happens is they love bomb you. They love you, and your experience is that, long story short, is that all of your defenses, you drop all of your defenses, and you make yourself as vulnerable as possible, and you let them in as deeply as possible within you, because they're very good at eliciting that, because they're seeking that. They honestly want that. They're not trying to manipulate you. They honestly want that from you. And they honestly believe that they love you deeply and passionately, and their only conscious desire is to love you and to be loved by you. So, as you know, nobody does that better than a borderline. You drop your guard faster than ever. In the same way you drop your guard with an infant or a puppy or a kitten. It's the same. I don't know. I'd love to analyze that. I wish you could hook up the brain, have somebody find a little baby kitten and, see what happens to the brain when they do that. And then see what happens, if you could put electrodes on somebody and measure what happens when they meet the borderline for the first time, and there's the love bombing. It's probably going to be the same parts of the brain that are stimulated. And there must be some evolutionary physiological response to somebody who comes to you with that infantile, because borderlines are emotionally regressed in terms of their psychological evolution. They're infants. So the purity, the innocence, and the absolute truth and honesty with which they come to you with their love and their need, I think it must, make people just drop their guard immediately. Because you don't normally do that. Most people don't drop their guard. It takes you a while. You're in your normal brain. You realize that this romantic thing is sort of, we've got to find a happy balance. It takes a while to really get to know somebody. But the moment the borderline hits you, you drop all of that. And I think it's, again, the same thing. You see an infant, in the woods, all by itself. You drop all, you open yourself up completely. You grab up the infant and you go and you grab the puppy or the kitten. I think it's the same scenario. When they do that and you open yourself up completely to them, of course, all of your unresolved, deepest needs for love and affection get stimulated. And so there's this immediate super glue bond that happens. And it can happen, within minutes. It happens so fast. And then there's a period of, just long enough for you to be in the, the idealization phase, in the, where you feel as loved and as safe as you can possibly have ever imagined, beyond your wildest imaginations. And then, when you're at your deepest, most vulnerable, when you love the borderline, really deeply, when you've reached the deepest level that you can get at in that phase of the relationship, then they split on you. And that's a really great term because they go from one extreme to the other in a blink of an eye for no logical reason. Of course, they have a reason and they'll explain that to you, but it will be as if they were in another universe. They will explain things that you did and you said that either you did or you didn't say, or they took one word completely out of context, or worse than that, you didn't say anything, you had a look on your face, and they've decided because of that one look on your face in that one split second, they have created an entire script of everything that you've been thinking and doing over the past however long it is, and they will go from loving you to hating you with no real world provocation. Meaning they've experienced a provocation, they think they know why they're doing it, and they can give you the reasons why in their mind. But when you look at it objectively, none of that happened. In fact, the opposite was going on. And so this creates a tremendous confusion. And that's the first when I go through, those periods in my life when, people important to me have done this, because I realize that now having, one of the benefits of having dated a borderline is now I'm realizing that my parents had, at the very least, borderline tendencies, because they did the same thing. In fact, my dad used to do this. My dad would get drunk when I was a kid, and then he would call me in to talk to him, and then he would act like he was really interested in what's going on in school, what are you doing in life, and he would act as though he was getting ready to really laud me and support me as a good father would. And after I had told him all of the great things that I've done, I won this scholastic award in school or whatever it was, now daddy's going to love me, then he would turn around and say, yeah, but you know what, when I was your age, I used to, I had this thriving business and I was this successful, and that's too bad. You're not there yet. Well, it's too bad you haven't, and it was devastating to me, devastating to my ego. And, this is what borderlines do. They make you feel like they do. They think that you're God. They treat you, in their mind, what's happening is their infantile, emotional, psychological worship of the parent, because you are the parent to them. They'll never see you as an equal. They will always see you as a parent. And so they are worshiping the parent. And this is a really great feeling. And it's, you think it's love, but it's not. It's you're being worshipped. And then they go from worshiping you to hating you. You go from being a god to them to being the devil. The most loving, beautiful thing in the world to the most evil, destructive thing in the world. And this creates tremendous confusion. Now, in hindsight, if you've been out of the relationship, if you've been discarded and you've been out of the relationship for a while, then you start to get angry. And then you start to have rage, and then you start to want revenge, and then you want to, get them to pay for what they've done, or when are they going to realize what they've done to you? That never happens when you're in the relationship. That happens after you have consciously realized that you're never going to get what you want from them. When it becomes clear to you that it's over and they're not going to hoover you, then you're full of rage. You weren't full of rage in the moment. I mean, some people, don't get me wrong, some people do get angry, and there are people that get angry at their borderlines and sometimes even get abusive. But you don't really have a conscious awareness of how wronged you are. Your first response is going to be coming out of that fight or flight or tend and befriend. And so if you're the partner who has been programmed to fix the borderline, you are going to be in the tend and befriend mode, which means that in order to avoid the threat to your survival, which is when the borderline splits on you, it's a threat to your survival. Because during the love bombing phase, you have become programmed to believe that your emotional survival depends on them loving you. You've become addicted to their love, and you think that without it you'll die. And so when they split on you, that's the first thing that's stimulated, is this tend and befriend, which is, how do I get it back? How do I make them feel safe? This whole time that you're filled with all of this deep empathic emotion, tears streaming down your face, I'm talking about myself, tears streaming down your face, saying, if I could just get them to understand that they're safe. I have such compassion for the pain that they're in. I just wish that they, if I can prove to her that she's loved, then she won't do this, and then I'll be able to love her, and then she'll be okay. All of that is coming from a very primitive defense mechanism within you. I said defense mechanism. So stop taking such pride in the fact that you love them unconditionally. There's nothing in that you need to be feeling proud of. You are operating from your fear of destruction. And that creates in you an empathy. Your empathy is not coming from an objective, truly unconditional place of love, where you love somebody without any attachment or without any agenda. Your version of unconditional love, which means that you'll continue to love them no matter how much abuse that you receive, is coming from that state of tend and befriend, because you're confused. You're confused as hell, because what just happened didn't make any sense. And what this does is this takes away your ability to think rationally. So you're already not in a rational state because of all of the perceived feelings of love and attachment that you have, and then the responsibility, because you've been programmed, from the beginning you are programmed to make them feel safe and nurtured, just like with an infant. The difference is that if you're a parent with an infant, the infant learns to feel loved. The borderline, that never happens. So you're on this hamster wheel of constantly feeling stimulated. The combination of your evolution, the way that your brain is wired to respond to the impetus of the crying infant, your need to placate the crying infant because the human species wants to continue to survive. But then there's also the cognitive dissonance, which is you have this need to take care of them, and then they act completely irrationally, completely opposite when you are at your most vulnerable. And that cognitive dissonance, that confusion, puts you in a state where you can't think rationally. You're not able to stop and go, hang on a second, something's really wrong here. Even if the part of you knows that, the other part of you that's associated with the fight or flight, the tender befriend, is so confused, it can't figure out what it's supposed to do next. So you never get to the place of being able to rationally and objectively analyze the situation, because you're in complete survival mode. So anyway, that's what I realized, is that the most damaging part of this isn't the betrayal. That's very, very damaging as well. It's not the being rejected, having somebody you love reject you. It's not that. It's not even the abuse. When they gaslight you, when they project onto you, when they accuse you of things you didn't do. That's very, very damaging and destructive. The worst part is, and what completely keeps you like a deer in the headlights, is the confusion. It incapacitates you. You can't respond appropriately. That's what I remember, going back to those those pivotal moments in my childhood when both my mother and my father, I could go some of the crazy abusive things that my mom did. But it was always after that, always after, them making me feel loved and accepted and dropping my guard and feeling vulnerable and feeling like I'm finally going to get mommy and daddy's love, whichever one I was interacting with. And then they would split on me. And what I remember the most when I get beneath the pain, when I get beneath the anger, is the confusion. I was confused. My little kid brain didn't understand what was going on. And there was a point in time when I thought I was going crazy. In my, when I started, just before I started entering puberty, I thought I was going crazy. And I probably was on the edge of becoming a borderline myself. So I have a greater appreciation for what borderlines have been through, why they are the way that they are. It's the confusion. That confusion is, as I said, I think it's the most damaging there is, the most damaging thing. And so borderlines, if you're watching, yes, when you accuse people of things they haven't done, it's extremely damaging. When you reject people, yes, that hurts. The most damaging thing is when you, after having had the most loving experience so far to date in your relationship, you then, because they looked at you a certain way, because they said one word or one phrase, because they left the room, and because they left the room, you became overwhelmed with this fear of abandonment, and therefore you created in your mind some narrative of how they're doing this or doing that to you. When you do the exact opposite of what just happened, after you, the borderline, after you have love bombed them, after you have done your work to make them love you and care about you, to then turn around and reject them for the very thing you asked them to do, it creates a toxic confusion that stuns. It's the best way to put it. It stuns your partner, and they never sort of get out of that. And that's the most damaging part, I think. All right. I could go on and on and on about all of that other stuff, but I don't want to. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, or just see if anybody has any comments on the chat. Let me just refresh it here, see if there's anybody out there. Let me tell you again the 4 things that I recommend everybody do. If you want to heal completely from the relationship, the first thing you have to do is you have to go no contact. No contact means that you make it impossible for the borderline to contact you. Not that you haven't called them today and you're checking them out on Facebook. What do I do when they contact me? Well, if you're asking that question, you haven't gone no contact. It means that you throw your phone in the river, you move, you get whatever it is, you make it absolutely impossible for them to contact you. Number 2, you work all 12 steps of coda.org or whatever 12-step group you want with a sponsor. You can't do it alone. You have to do it with a sponsor. And then you have to sponsor or be available to sponsor someone else. And then number 3, which can be done at the same time as 1 and 2, is you work with a therapist who understands borderline personality disorder. And then 4, you do some kind of daily meditation, which is really just step 11. Okay, those are the 4 things you do. And let me be clear, I am being very inflexible in this. In my experience, this is the only way to completely heal from the relationship. Specifically, that 4th step. If somebody said, I even though it's you can do all four. If somebody said, I can't do all four, which one should I do? I would say, do number 2. The 12 steps are the most important thing. The 12 steps have the ability to change your neurology so that you can not only heal, but that you won't constantly be on the hamster wheel. Being out of the relationship time will not heal the damage that has been done to you. You have been shifted and you are in a state of PTSD, and that PTSD will not go away because your unconscious mind has now been stimulated. Your unconscious mind, the part of your mind you are not aware of, which drives you, your unconscious mind has now been stimulated to need that love. You are now on a mission to get that borderline to love you. You are in a state of trauma. Even though your unconscious mind doesn't know from time. Your unconscious mind does not know that you've been out of the relationship, you were discarded 6 months ago. Your unconscious mind doesn't know that. Your unconscious mind doesn't know when you were 4 years old and your mom split on you as a kid. Your unconscious mind hasn't forgot it. It's still there. There's no such thing as time. So once you've been stimulated and damaged in this way, it creates a dynamic that does not go away on its own. And so this is why the 12 steps are so important, because they actually stop that, and then it helps you to shift and change the neurology within your brain. That's why it's the most important one. So if you do those 4 things, you can completely heal from the relationship. And then you'll be able to focus on what really drove you into the relationship, which is the unresolved codependent issues from your family of origin. All right? So those are the 4 things. And yes, I'm saying if you don't do them, in my experience, I could be wrong. Is there other possible ways? I'm sure there are. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in anybody else. I haven't seen it in myself. We're talking not just surviving, I've been out of it and I'm feeling a little better and I'm doing better than I was. No, I'm very, whatever. I'm very clear that this is a 100% complete healing of that relationship. Your family of origin issues, you're going to have to deal with that probably the rest of your life. But in terms of that relationship, you can heal from that. Do the 4 things. That's the only way that I know. And it doesn't matter. Even if there is another way to do it, you don't know what that other way is, and I don't know what that other way is. When you go to the doctor and he says, well, I don't know, there might be some other treatments, but for right now, this bottle of pills will get rid of your gonorrhea. Yeah, well, maybe if I just take more vitamin C. No, it's an infection. It'll get to your brain and kill you. Take these pills and you'll be cured of gonorrhea. That's what we're talking about here. Do the 4 things. You will be cured of that relationship. You won't have to continue to stay in that state of cognitive dissonance. All right, let's see. D. Diana, hypervigilance for anyone close to them. So, what's really helpful is if people write out a whole sentence, like with a subject and a verb and an object, and, you let me know. I don't know what that means. You've got half of a statement in there, and I don't know what that means. You have a point you want to make, right? So go ahead and make it. Write out a whole sentence or a whole paragraph with a context so that I know what that means, because I don't know what that means yet. Saman Arfaya, your channel has helped me during the most difficult period of my life. I salute you for everything you're doing. Well, I'm grateful that it's been helpful. It helps me too. Elon Nuez, question, Mike, did you find it unnerving when your parents were actually nice to you and treated you with respect? No. Because they didn't really do that. So I can understand what you're talking about, though. But no, that never really happened. I mean, it was like, anyway, that wasn't my experience. But I can understand why you felt that way. Fernando Almaguer says, Waking Up app is a truly beautiful app for meditation. It's a free. Don't spam other people's stuff on my channel. And whatever, if that works for you, I'm happy. Don Gartner, if you have a question, do me a favor and write the word question. As you can see, Elon Nuez above you, he wrote the word question in all caps. You see that? Because normally, if there's a ton of people, I won't answer anything unless I see it's a question. When there's only a few people on, I'll read everything that comes in front of me. But he said, do you get like a chemical that shoots through your body when you think of your BP? I don't know what that chemical is. And I don't know why that's important to you. But let me, forget about trying to figure out the chemical. I'm more interested in your feeling. So you're saying, Don, that when you think of your borderline X, you have a feeling, and you're trying to figure out what that chemical is, which is you're trying to euphemize it. You're trying to make it into something more palatable. If that's what you're saying. So who cares what the chemical is? What's important is that you're having an experience, an unpleasant experience. And what's important about that is not the chemical that's shooting through your brain, but why that is happening. And that's happening because you have an unresolved attachment that hasn't gone away. In other words, you're still in a state of trauma. You believe that your survival depends on them finally coming around. People have been out of relationships for 10 years and they still wake up in a sweat. They still, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just being jolted out of a deep sleep, just in terror. It's because of that unconscious trauma. You're still traumatized and you're still in it. You're still trying to fix the threat to your survival. And you tell yourself, well, but I haven't seen them. I mean, they're not in my life anymore. They've gone. I've moved on to, you might even be in another relationship. But your unconscious mind doesn't know from time. It's still happening. The trauma is still going on. You're still being traumatized. And so that's why that chemical shoots through your body. So what's important is not the chemical, whichever chemical it is. What's important is that you do the 4 things to stop and reverse that process. That's what those 4 things about. So does that happen to me? No. I have 0 negative response to my borderline X. I don't have any need for her. I'm not pining for her. I'm not thinking about what was good about it and if I could only get that back. I'm not doing that. And I'm also not doing the I hate her, what she did to me. That was the worst thing that's ever happened. She needs to know. Somebody's got to, and then feeling bad for them. I hope they're okay. Who are they with right now? Did they find somebody else? And why is she in love with him and not me? None of those things are going on. I don't look back on the relationship and think of the love bombing and get overwhelmed with desire and sadness. I now see the relationship for what it was. I was projecting onto her and she was projecting onto me, and we weren't really connecting. All of the love that I thought was happening wasn't happening. But the only reason I know that is because I did the 4 things. So what you're talking about, Don, is you're talking about still being in a state of trauma, which is what I'm saying is if you've been in these relationships, it doesn't matter if the relationships end. The trauma continues because it is a deeply held trauma that's actually been resurfaced. It's a previous trauma from childhood, and the borderline has stimulated that and brought it out of its protective shell, and now it's going crazy inside of you, and you're in a constant state of trauma. So no, that doesn't happen to me anymore. Okay, Vin is doing his work. Good for him. Now he's got a question. I'm aware that the borderline is stalking me 24/7, which makes me hyper self-conscious about everything. I post on social media knowing she's reading it, looking for messages. Gauging my emotional state. This keeps me thinking about her and the situation. Does this ever wear off? How can I handle this without getting rid of my accounts and losing my followers? First off, Vin, you've just started the process. So my response to everything is the same. Do the 4 things. So there is a thing called narcissistic mortification. maybe you've heard about it, how to mortify the narcissist. So it's a fancy way of saying it's what stops the narcissist from abusing you, from wanting to have anything to do with you. So what you really want is a true discard, because borderlines never discard you. What they do is they lock you in the closet, and they may lock you in the closet for 10 or 20 years. But they never get rid of anybody. They take hostages, which is energetically, at the very least, you're constantly still in the relationship. They never, there's never any closure. Even if they've completely gone no contact, that's why you still wake up in the middle of the night. So what you want is real closure. That only comes when you mortify the narcissist. And mortification is when the narcissist is forced to see themselves. So when the narcissist looks at you and sees themselves as they truly are, it is so mortifying that they run and hide. That's where the whole symbolism of vampires not seeing seeing nothing in the mirror. That's a borderline, because borderlines and narcissists have no identity. When they look to find who they are, there's nobody there. It's this big empty hole. So that's what that is. I mean, looking in the mirror and nobody being there, that means that there's nobody home. There's no identity, and that's mortifying. They can't handle it. They can't tolerate truly seeing how empty they are. This is why everything is with the narcissist is a false projection. The reason why I'm now interchanging narcissist and borderline is because borderline personality disorder is now being recognized as simply a form of narcissistic personality disorder. And both narcissists and borderlines have no sense of self. They have no identity. This is the cause of all of this. So what you need to do is to have that stimulated in them. How do you do that? The 4 things. When you first go no contact and you make it impossible for them to contact you. When you make it impossible for them to contact you, what it means is that you have made a commitment. You have made a commitment to, it's just like when you're going to give up heroin. You make a commitment and then you go through withdrawals. And even if I'll die before I take another snort of heroin. I'll die before that happens. So you're going to die before you let the borderline contact you. That's the commitment you have to have. It doesn't mean that you feel comfortable or anything like that. It means that I know that I'm going to want this woman more than anything else in the world, but I'm going to die before I let it happen. And the rest of the 3 things I tell you to do are things that you do to make sure that, number 1, it's just like, alcoholics, they never drink again. That's the whole idea. If you want to be sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't drink. So that's why they don't celebrate, they don't celebrate 10 years from not stealing money from the bank, or 10 years from not cheating on my wife, or, you get 10 years from not drinking alcohol. That's the first thing for them. For you, the first thing is making it impossible for your borderline to contact you. So when you do that, then you have to do the other 3 things to keep the first one intact, because that's the first thing that's going to go. The reason why people end up back with their borderline or staying in that state of cognitive dissonance is because in their mind they haven't gone no contact, because you're addicted. So you started the process, and now you're doing the other things. You started back at CODA, you called your therapist, so now you've started to do the things to put yourself back in that state. That is going to mortify her, even if she's not consciously aware of what you're doing. Trust me, just that, if you want to get spiritual about it, for whatever reason, it's going to create a vibration that she's going to pick up on. I have no idea if my borderline ex knows about this channel. I don't care whether she knows or not. But, me doing all of it and making this channel, every time that I make a video about it, it mortifies whether she knows about it or not. It makes her see herself for who she is. And so I'm pretty certain that I'm probably the last thing that she wants in her life. So she's not going to be stalking me as long as I'm doing the work. She's not going to be interested. Yours will lose interest in you when you do those 4 things with everything you have. So it doesn't matter that she's stalking you or not stalking you. That's, I understand what you're saying, but it's meaningless. The only thing that you're required to do is make it impossible for her to contact you. If she does contact you, you continue to block her in every possible way. That's going to mortify her. And you will heal from that. So what you're wanting, that all of us want, is, yeah, but I'm surrounded by people who do drugs or drink. I can't go to a party without there being alcohol or drugs around, assuming you're trying to get off of drugs and alcohol. I'm trying to make the comparison between getting off of a chemical and getting off of your borderline. So that's all you're saying to me right now, is that there's still this influence on me that's making me want to go back. And I'm saying that's not what's important. You go to an alcoholic, comes to you and says, but I really want to drink. You don't go, oh, well, you want to drink. Oh, then go ahead. I thought you didn't want to, but now that I see that you want one, oh, you want to stick heroin in your neck. Oh, well, then go have some. No, that's ridiculous. You would say, it doesn't matter what you want. You don't do that. You do the opposite of that. So the same is true for you. So yeah, you have this addictive connection, and there's all this other stuff around that's trying to get you back where you were. And I'm not here to tell you that you're supposed to snap your fingers and magically be strong and not have any temptation. You're going to be tempted. You're going to be in pain. You do these 4 things no matter what. No matter what she does, no matter what you feel, you do those 4 things. So you're hyper self-conscious. Big deal. You'll get over it. Just do your best. You say, this keeps me thinking about her. No, it doesn't. Nothing outside of you is doing anything to you. She can't make you do anything. And circumstances can't make you do anything. Your brain is fine. Look, I know, I've been there. There's been times in my life where there's been women who weren't borderlines, who I either dated or were interested in me, and I wasn't interested. Or we dated a couple times and then I decided I wasn't interested. I never thought about them ever again. Even if they texted me a week later and said, hey, I've been thinking about you. Oh, hey, yeah, no, I'm not interested. And then I don't think about it. So what's the difference? But the borderline, she split on me and went away, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. What's the difference? It's not the external circumstance that's making you think about her. You're doing that within you. Your brain is just finding excuses. If you were disconnected, you wouldn't care what she did. She wants to follow your social media, so fucking what? What do I care? So stop blaming things around you. You're not a victim. This is all coming from within you. You're thinking about it because you'll think about her whether she's watching you or not watching you, right? So if I take what you're saying the only reason I'm thinking about her, I wouldn't normally be thinking about her, but I know that she's stalking me, so that's making me think about her. No, if she wasn't stalking you and she had split on you and she had discarded you and had blocked you, you would still be thinking about her. So her thinking about you or not thinking about you is not making you think about her. Stop giving other people your power. You're doing it to yourself, and that's what you're going to learn as you go back into therapy and you do the steps. You're going to realize you're the one that's been seeking out this destructive relationship the whole time. Nobody forced you into anything. All right, what else? Okay, what else? All right, nothing else. All right, so that's it. Short thing is looking into the confusion. What has been helpful for me when I've gone back to my childhood issues is when My parents did those weird splitting things where one minute they loved me and the next minute they were shaming me for something, for the very thing that they were supposedly about to, give me some kind of reward. What I've really been focusing on is the confusion. The confusion I found is the most potent feeling, in that the other defense feelings like anger and sadness and all of that are actually defense mechanisms trying to protect me from the actual confusion, which was I'm finding to be the most toxic part of it. So I give that to you. Whenever you think about that, if you want to think about, the last time your borderline split on you, instead of thinking about the pain, instead of thinking about the anger, instead of thinking about the need to get them back and all those other defense response feelings, try and isolate the confusion and feel within your body the trauma of the confusion. See if that helps. It's been helpful for me. Of course, I'm doing the other 4 things, so you got to do that as well. All right, so that's it for me, guys. I hope you're doing well. I will see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and talk to you guys soon.